Hello teacher, my name is Angeles Gonzalez Salazar and I hope this video finds you well and I will start presenting my project. Okay, in this video I will analyze the role of the first language in English language teaching and learning. This topic is especially relevant because learners don't start learning English from zero. They already process a linguistic system that influences how they understand and produce a second language. Understanding the role of the first language is important because it directly affects pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and a student's confidence when using English. From a psycholinguistic perspective, the first language is always present during the process of learning a second language. In this presentation, I will first conceptualize English as a foreign language and English as a second language. Then, I will explain how the first language influences the learning of a foreign language. Discuss some common barriers related to L1 use in L2 teaching, and finally reflect on the challenges I have found in my own teaching experience. English as a foreign language refers to learning English in a context where it is not commonly used for a daily communication. In EFL settings, students are exposed to English mainly inside the classroom through informal instructions, textbooks, and teacher explanations. Because English is not used socially outside the classroom, learners have limited opportunities to practice the language in real-life situations. As a result, the classroom becomes the main source of input and interaction. In this type of context, the first language often plays an important role since students use it to understand instructions, grammar, and new vocabulary. Okay, English as a second language. English as a second language occurs when learners live in an environment where English is used regularly for communication. In this context, English is not only learned in the classroom but also used in the daily life, such as at a school, work, or in the community. This constant exposure allows learning to interact with the language in meaningful situations which supports natural language development. As explained in the Babel video, this type of context promotes language acquisition rather than conscious language learning. This is because learners are more focused on communication and meaning rather than on rules. Influence of L1 on L2 learning. Okay. According to the reading, the learner's first language plays a significant role in a second language acquisition. Although it is not the only one or the most determining factor, the first language acts as a cognitive foundation that learners rely on to understand, organize, and process new linguistic information in the second language. Rather than learning a new language in isolation, learners build new knowledge based on what they already know from their L1. One of the areas where the influence of the first language is most noticeable is pronunciation. The reading explains that phonological transfer is very common, especially in the early stage of learning. Learners tend to interpret and produce sounds in the second language through the system of their first language. For example, a Spanish speaking like me may pronounce certain English vowel or consonant sounds using Spanish phonetic, which can affect intelligibility. In addition to pronunciation, the first language also influences grammar and sentence structure. Learners often transfer grammatical rules, word order, and sentence patterns from their L1 into the second language. This transfer can lead to errors when the structures of both languages differ. However, these errors should not be seen only as mistakes but as evidence of active learning process in which learners are testing hypotheses about the new languages. Vocabulary acquisition is another area strongly affected by L1 influence. Learners frequently rely on cognates to understand and remember new words. While cognates can facilitate learning through positive transfer, false cognates may cause confusion and misunderstandings, resulting in negative transfer. From a psycholinguistic perspective, these processes are natural and expected. They show that learners are actively constructing meaning by using their previous linguistic knowledge. Therefore, L1 influence should not be viewed as an obstacle but as a natural part of foreign language learning that teachers need to recognize and manage strategically. Common barriers of L1 in L2 teaching. Okay, one of the most common barriers related to the use of the first language in L2 teaching is negative transfer. This occurs when difference between the first and second language cause learning difficulties and recurrent errors. The reading explains that learners tend to apply familiar L1 rules to the second language, especially when both language appears to be similar. This idea is closely related to contrastive analysis and error analysis, which helps teachers identify predictable errors based on difference between languages. Another significant barrier is the excessive dependence on translation. When students translate everything word by word, they may understand the general meaning of a message, but their fluency and spontaneity of English are limited. Over-reliance on translation can prevent learners from developing thinking patterns directly in the second language, which slows the acquisition process. Fossilization is also an important barrier in L2 teaching. Some errors become permanent when learners consistently rely on L1 structures and don't receive sufficient exposure to accurate L2 input. According to the reading, fossilized errors are difficult to correct because learners become accustomed to certain incorrect forms that no longer interfere with communication. Finally, the reading emphasized that the main problem is not the presence of the first language itself, but the belief that its influence is always negative. In reality, L1 can function as a communicate and cognitive strategy when learners don't yet have enough L2 resources. The challenges for us teachers is to recognize when L2 use supports learning and when it begins to limit language development. Okay, challenges in my teaching experience. In my teaching experience, working with children from the ages from 9 to 13 years old from a private elementary school in face-to-face classes, I have observed several challenges related to the use of L1 and L2. One of the most frequent issues that students tend to translate from everything mentally from Spanish to English, which affects their fluency and confidence. Another challenge that I have noticed is a students' fear of speaking English in front of other people. Many children understand what is being said, but they hesitate to speak because they are afraid of making mistakes. As a result, they rely more on Spanish as a safe option. Well, as you can see from me, myself, also pronunciation is also a significant challenge since students often transfer Spanish sounds into English, which affects a lot of the time. Well, that being said, from my perspective as a teacher, encouraging my students into speaking English consistently, explaining grammar without overusing L1, and maintaining a balance between L1 and L2 are a constant challenge in the classroom. Okay. In conclusion, the influence of the first language and the second language is inevitably and natural. Both the reading and the video that you showed me show that L1 should not be eliminated but used strategically according to learner's level and context. A balanced use of L1 can support comprehension and reduce anxiety, while increased exposure to L2 help learners develop confidence, fluency, and communicate competence. Okay, teacher, thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you have a great week.